All right, welcome back to One True Podcast, talking Baylor and Big 12 football. Alongside me, as always, every week is Zach Smith. Zach, you recovered from your Utah trip?
Yeah, my legs are still a little bit sore from hiking. We did that a couple times, but it was a great trip. Other than getting locked in a stairwell at Rice-Eccles Stadium. Other than that, it was a great trip.
That's awesome. We'll have to hear more about that.
Sure. I can't wait to tell that story.
Right. Also making it to Utah was Darby Brown of KWTX. Our good friend Darby is with us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. I didn't get to hike at all, so no soreness over here. And no locking didn't get locked in anywhere. So I guess different experiences, but still doing well.
Yeah, I saw you were at the stadium early on that Saturday.
Yeah, that's why there was no hiking. When we're there, we're pretty much, we have a morning show now, so we're on the air in the morning, and then we kind of just, take a nap if you can, and then go to the game. So yeah, more so a lot of time at the stadium.
Gotcha. Well, Darby's been at KWTX for 5 years. You see her all over the place, including Baylor games, and so we thought it would be fun to talk a little football this week. So like I said, both of y'all were in Salt Lake City and witnessed Baylor's 23-12 loss to Utah firsthand. So obviously there's no shame in losing at Rice-Eccles Stadium. A lot of teams do it. 33 out of the last 35 teams to go there have walked away with an L. But this still, to me, felt like a step back for the Bears. What did you guys see as like the biggest areas of concern for Baylor? And we'll start with our special guest, Darby.
Well, the offense was obviously the biggest area of concern. I think, I would say I think potentially they took a step forward with the defense, although with Cam Rising leaving the game about halfway through, that definitely impacted, who they were trying to shut down. It became a way different game. So I do think there was some improvement in the defense, at least in the, after kind of the initial period of the game where they really, looked like they might have gotten beat 50-0. So they definitely kind of reeled it back in. But the offense, certainly, they're just, and I don't even know if it's a step back, but they're just not in a good spot right now. So I think, definitely not the team that they were against Tarleton State, which we knew that would be the case. But I didn't think, that type of production was just, especially in that first half, was really, honestly, a tough watch on offense.
Yeah, it gave me a lot of 2023 vibes. How about you, Zach? You say offense, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's the offense, but specifically DeQuan Finn's decision making, I think they did pretty well when it was a designed run for DeQuan Finn, but when he had to, screen passes, make those decisions quickly, he kind of struggled with that. He missed a few receivers that were just kind of wide open. When on the strip sack where he fumbled that led to a short Utah touchdown, that was, I think, he snapped the ball too early, it was his decision that led to that turnover. So, I think that DeQuan Finn, I think, is still the guy. He's still probably the right guy for this offense. I know we'll talk about that later, but, just his decision making, he looked rattled from the jump, and that was very concerning.
I agree. I did not think Finn played that great. And of course, he threw 2 picks against Tarleton, even as well as they played. Now, it was interesting. I wrote a story about the offense for today's paper, and it was interesting to hear Dave always sort of bring it back to the running game. And I think that's just maybe because this offense is really predicated on that run, opening up the avenues for the pass, but I just still thought there were some bad throws. Sometimes you got to, call a spade a spade.
Yeah, for sure. I agree that you could tell he was rattled. It was very, and I don't know if you got to put some on the offensive line, I think, as well. I mean, he there's a little bit of struggles there that I think are obvious, but for sure, he was just almost flustered. Like you could just tell he was kind of flinging things around. I do think those picks against Tarleton State, I think he's a guy that's not afraid to try to make something happen and almost force something to happen. But I think, he's going to have to learn, that this is a new, conference, all these different things. He's got to kind of learn to reel some of that in.
Yeah, I agree. I think he had a little bit of a gunslinger attitude that game, and I wrote it in my column after that game that he's not going to be able to make those kind of throws against everyone. But ultimately, they are where we kind of thought they might be after two games. Baylor's sitting there at 1-1. Um, do you guys still like this team, or do you think they're well equipped enough to get back to a bowl game?
I certainly think I don't think that game against Utah changes anything,
Hmm.
really. I mean, obviously, you want to see more out of the offense. You want to see more out of DeQuan Finn, but I certainly think they're a bowl team. I still think they can win 7 games. This next stretch of games against Air Force, at Colorado, and then home against BYU, is huge, right? And then you go to Iowa State before a bye week, but I think they can realistically rattle off 3 wins in a row. And I think that would just get them right back in the right headspace and kind of in a wide open Big 12. I really think pointing towards the postseason is the way they can go. And this next game against Air Force is a huge kind of, point in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I think that these next three are winnable games, and the team last year wouldn't have won these games. So I think that's
Mhm.
the thing, though. They
Yeah.
they need to decide if they can win games. I think these are ones that they definitely should. I think Coach Aranda talked a lot about how they maybe put too much pressure on this Utah game and that opportunity that to go in there and upset a ranked opponent and all those things. Maybe for these next three, there's a little bit less of that. They can kind of reel things back in and calm some guys down again, as much as that stuff maybe does impact the game. We're not totally sure, but I do think these next three games are, they're right where we thought they'd be. Like you said, Bryce, I think that's spot on. And so I think the rest of the season's still ahead of them. And, there's games they should win. We'll see if they do.
Yeah. You know how every team has a get back coach, the guy that stands on the sideline and tells the guys to get back behind the line that they're not supposed to cross. I feel like this Air Force game is a get back game for Baylor. They need to get back to playing a little more like they did against Tarleton. Obviously, the opponent has a lot to do with that. Utah's defense is very good. But nevertheless, they need to be a lot sharper, I think. And speaking of bowl games, um, this week, as y'all mentioned, the Bears do get Air Force. That's the last team Baylor played when they went to a bowl game at the end of 2022 season. Darby, were you at that game?
Yeah, bad memories from that game. It's honestly a little bit of a blur because I was just trying to survive. It was so cold. That was like the coldest I'd ever been in my whole life. So I'm sure a lot of people that were at that game feel the same way. It was a tough scene. So
You,
Yeah.
you
yeah,
Southerners and your thin blood. Come on, get
Oh
over
my
it.
gosh, Zach,
it was so cold.
you would have thought it was cold. It was really freaking bone chilling. And I'll never forget John Warner and I getting out of the car, and all we did was literally walk from the parking lot to the press box. And I was like, this sucks. I want to go home.
Yeah. We kept going in and outside like to film and then go back in to warm up and film and go back in because it was terrible. Yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the game itself was a rough one as well.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so a lot of bad, bitter memories from that game for Baylor. The Falcons are kind of a unicorn and a whole pasture full of horses out there in college football, in that they run that very old school wing T offense, run heavy. But they also haven't exactly lit up the scoreboard this year. Is there anything in this game from y'all's perspective that Baylor needs to worry about?
You want me to go
Well,
first?
yeah,
Oh,
go
Zach.
for it,
Okay.
Darby. Go
Okay.
for it.
I think it's more so. I think on defense they've been preparing for this. I think there was some we've heard about some practices that they had been working on preparing for their offense. So I think at this point they should be. They've had all fall whatever that they knew they were playing them. So I do think that they'll be prepared on defense. I just think the biggest concerns does fall back on their offense, just trying to get things back. In shape again on their end, which I think is kind of obviously the opponent makes a big difference, as we've seen with Utah. But I do think ultimately, like they need to make passes, they need to run the ball, they got to do a lot on their own, and I think that's probably the biggest thing right now is they just got to get that going again. And I think you take any opponent, that would be the same, the same goal here, but really it falls on that.
Yeah, I think the defense is ready to kind of feast on this. That front seven for Baylor is really good, and I think Keaton Thomas and Matt Jones and Trevin Ma'ai, and if Cooper Lands is back a little bit, Jackie Marshall as well. I think they're gonna rack up the tackles in this one, and I think they're gonna, you know, hold them to very little yards. I think that's pretty easy to predict. But defensively, Air Force is not bad, right? And so I think this is a good test for the Baylor offense to, Brice, like you said, get back, kind of get right. It's not Tarleton. It's not that easy. But it's not as stiff as Utah. And so it's kind of that perfect medium for the offense to kind of show what they can do and kind of get some confidence back, but also be a little bit tested, more tested than they were against Tarleton for sure. So I think this is a great spot for this game to fall on the schedule just for confidence and everything. And yeah, I think Baylor is going to, get some of that confidence back.
I asked, excuse me, dave-aranda at the press conference on Monday if it was an advantage at all having seen Air Force, as recently as they did, and and he's a coach, so he's gonna couch it a little bit as coach speak, and he was like, it's kind of an advantage for them too, but at the same time, I just think that because you see this kind of an offense so little. The fact that, a lot of these guys have a little experience now going against it, it's gotta help. I mean, it just has to for Baylor's defense. And I could really see Baylor defensively kind of showing out and making a lot of plays and flying around, as you guys said. So on Friday night in the Big 12, we have a top 25 matchup between a pair of conference teams. Number 14, Kansas State hosts number 20, Arizona. I'm gonna pause there for a second. So Darby's an Arizona girl. Were you a Wildcats fan? Were you a Sun Devils fan? Did you care about either one?
So I was raised in Arizona, but my family's all from Michigan. So I really they didn't have any roots in either school. I didn't go to either school. So we've always kind of followed both. ASU is obviously closer to Phoenix, Scottsdale, where I grew up, but there's also, Arizona basketball has been kind of what they've been for a long time too. So I think I kind of root for both, honestly, which I know is almost a sin to some people, but it is what it is. Yeah.
At least it's not rooting for both the Rangers and the Astros. I just don't understand that, but whatever. Uh, yeah, did you know she was a Michigan girl?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was
Okay.
one of the, yeah. I think like you identify more as an Arizona girl though, right?
Right. Yeah. But I am a Michigan State fan. I do have
There
a
we go.
say there between Michigan because my parents, went to Michigan State. So there is some more roots there. But yeah, I
If
am
you
more
said you were a
Arizona.
Michigan fan, I might kick you off this podcast right now.
Yeah. No,
Look at that. Shots
yeah.
fired.
No, I agree.
Anyway, where I was going with this, so this, much like the Baylor Utah game, is not actually a Big 12 game. We've got another one of these conference matchups that's not a conference game. Believe it was obviously set up before the Four Corners schools came to the Big 12. So even though it does not count in the Big 12 standings, would you say that the winner of this K-State Arizona game is the team to beat in the conference, or is Utah still the favorite in y'all's mind?
I think
What the,
Utah is
oh,
still the favorite, but there's a big but is if Cam Rising is actually hurt. I was kind of looking into that this morning to see what the status is, and obviously he still has a hand injury. I'm sure Utah fans are so frustrated because they're just exactly back to where they were last year with him kind of being up in the air, but they were a completely different team with him off the field, like completely night and day. So I still think with him healthy, I think they're rolling and I think they're the team to beat. But I think without him, these other two, I do think they could slide back up into the top. But, I think Arizona, had they, kept their coach from last year, I thought Arizona was going to come in and win the Big 12 this year. But I don't know if I feel the same way. I think I still like Utah with Cam Rising healthy.
Zach?
yeah, Darby's spot on about Cam Rising. If he is out, then Utah is not. They're just not going to win the Big 12 straight up. I think still Kansas State is probably still the best, suited to win it, but Avery Johnson has not looked out of this world yet. And Arizona also looks pretty good, but if they shut down McMillan in the last game against Northern Arizona, and Arizona struggled in that game. So I don't think I think it's too early to say that the winner of this game is in the driver's seat for the Big 12, especially with, UCF doing what it is doing, Oklahoma State just kind of struggling and battling some injuries, Iowa State having a lights out defense. So, short answer, yes, I think the winner of this game is the favorite, but there's so much more chaos in a conference that is just more wide open than I think we even thought at the beginning of the season that, it's just way too early to say that, the winner of this game is going to win the conference.
It's a good year for the rest of the Big 12 for Texas not to be in the league anymore. I mean, we said, like Zach said, I think we thought it was going to be wide open. It certainly appears to be wide open. I completely agree with y'all that, I mean, Cam Rising is the key for Utah. Um, Jerry Hill, was talking yesterday or 2 days ago, just he was not impressed with that true freshman quarterback at all. I mean, I was thinking, let's give the guy a little bit of a break. I mean, he's a true freshman out there playing for the first time and stuff. I guess maybe he played a little against Southern Utah, but it was a tough spot for him. So, they recruited him for a reason. I bet, but yeah, he was not impressed. And I think you got to give credit to Baylor's defense some too, but uh, yeah, I mean, I think K-State probably has a little bit of an edge in this game just because they're playing at home. But how about the receiver? What's his name? Tillman for Arizona.
T-Mac, McMillan,
Yeah,
Tetra. I don't know
McMillan.
how to say his first name.
Yeah, yeah.
Tetrario.
That dude, what like video game numbers he's been putting up. It's just unreal. I mean, he could win Big 12 Player of the Week every week. All right, I'm gonna give you a little bit of a bonus question here since I did bring up the Longhorns. How good did those dudes look? I mean, can they win a national championship?
I think they look really good. I do think Michigan does not look good. So to be fair, I think Michigan they don't look anywhere close. And this is all I already said my bias on this point. So I already said as a Michigan State fan, but I do not think Michigan looks good really at all. So I think that was not the game that we all thought it was going to be. Texas, Michigan, it just wasn't. But on the other side, I think Michigan is not legit at all, but I do think Texas is legit. I think they're very strong. And Quinn Ewers is just playing like out of his mind. So yeah, I just think they look really strong.
I mean, I've been on the Longhorns since like I got here, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're really good, and I didn't know how well it would go in their first year in the SEC, but when you've got a Manning backing you up, and there's no question, like they're not even talking about Arch Manning, that's all about Quinn Ewers. That's how well Quinn Ewers is playing right now, and that's making all the difference for Texas.
Yeah, here's what I like about the Longhorns, other than the fact that they are really, really talented. But you know, over the last decade plus, they have there's always been this sense of entitlement for the Longhorns. Like, they just thought they were going to roll the ball out and win, and it was always Texas is back, Texas is back, and it was always a little premature those Texas is back declarations. Uh, and now they go out and they win this big game at Michigan, defending national champion. Obviously, Michigan's not the same team, but nevertheless, a big, big road win for the Longhorns. And the attitude is more like, we have, yes, this is who we are, but like Sark is very much like, we got to keep working, we haven't arrived yet, da 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 da. I mean, so it's a different kind of feeling coming out of Austin, and that's a scary Texas team to me. I mean, so yeah, can they win it all? Sure, they can. I mean, they're number 2 in the country right now, so looking pretty good. There you go. You get a little SEC content here on the Big 12 podcast. But Darby, thanks for hopping on with us and talking a little ball.
Thank you guys. I'll see you out there this weekend, I'm
All
sure.
right.
So.
Awesome. Yep. We'll
Absolutely.
see you there. Thanks, y'all.